Hi, I'm Hope from Hope Embroidery, and today we're going to make this little heart cross stitch pattern that you can make even if you don't have the proper cross stitch fabric. So for this project, you're gonna need embroidery floss. I'm using all 6 strands of cotton embroidery floss for this project. Fabric, I'm using linen, but you can use any kind of fabric that you like. An embroidery hoop. You're gonna need a needle, some scissors. Now I like to use cute little embroidery scissors, but if you don't have those, that's fine. You can just use the scissors from your kitchen junk drawer. You're going to need your pattern, and I'll leave a link for this at the bottom in the description. This has been printed on something called Sulky Fabri-Solvi transfer paper. So I'll show you how that works in just a moment. And before you get started, go ahead and take some scrap cardboard, trace the inside of your embroidery hoop and cut yourself out a circle, because that's how we're going to end our hoop. We're going to end it or finish it by putting it in the back there so that we don't have to sew it and so that it lays nice and flat against your wall. Now the first thing that we need to do is to get our fabric into our hoop. So there's no hard and fast rule on this, but I typically recommend that if you're right-handed, you have the screw on your right side, and if you're left-handed, have them this side. That just makes it a little bit easier to tighten later on. So I'm gonna take my fabric and put it over my inner hoop. And then take my outer hoop and place it on top. And then I'm gonna trim around the edges. Now this next part is super important. So you're going to screw your hoop, but not all the way. Because then we're gonna go around and tighten our fabric by pulling on the edges. You really want your fabric to be as tight as possible. It makes it a lot easier to stitch more effectively, and it makes it look nicer. So then you'll go ahead and screw it a little bit more, and then go back around and tighten it even more. Now, if you know anything about embroidery, you know that it's kind of hard to find a good hoop these days. So you can see right here, there's a little bit of a gap right there in my hoop. So I already know that my fabric is gonna come loose as I stitch. So you may see me re-stretch it like I'm doing now as I stitch my pattern. And that's fine, that's normal. And then you're gonna tighten it, oops, as much as it'll go. And it should sound like a drum. Once it sounds like a drum, you're ready for the next step. That's about how tight you want it to be. So the next thing that I like to do is to go ahead and cut about an inch or so around the hoop. And I do that because if I don't, I know myself, and I know I will end up stitching this little corner piece here into the back, and that can be a pain to fix. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut around. The main thing you want to do here is that you need to leave enough so that it can be tucked into the back once you're done. So, and if you don't and mess up, it's fine. It doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, so I've got my little hoop there ready to go. Now I'm going to take this transfer paper and get it onto my fabric. You can use other transfer methods to get this pattern onto your fabric. I just like using this for these fake cross stitch patterns, because then I can get that grid perfectly onto my hoop. So this paper works just like a sticker. You're gonna take it off like that. And then you can see it's kind of see-through, and if you feel it, it kind of feels like a sticker paper situation. So I'm gonna do my best to get it down right in the center here. But what's great about this is that you can pick it up and pull it off if you don't get it right, but I think that looks pretty good. So one thing you can do to really make sure that it's nice and stuck on there is to flip it over and get something hard like these scissors and really get it into the fabric there. Now, how does this come off? I'll show you once we're done. But essentially it washes off. It just dissolves with water. It's pretty nifty. Now our hoop is ready to go. All right, now we need to get our needle threaded. So I'm using a pretty big needle here. I'm not sure of the size, to be honest with you. I think it's a tapestry needle. I'm gonna get the edge wet a little bit so I can flatten it out and go ahead and pass it through the eye. Now, if you look really closely at a strand of embroidery floss, you'll see that it's actually made up of 6 separate strands. For this project, I'm going to go ahead and use all 6 strands, and I've gotten out about an arm's length of floss. So one end, I've threaded my needle, and I've got a little bit of a tail there. And that way, as I'm stitching, it should mostly not come undone, even without tying a knot. And if it does, you just rethread it. And on the other end, so on one end I've got my needle threaded, on the other end I'm gonna tie a quick little knot here. And this knot will prevent it from coming up through the fabric. So then I like to snip off the tail like that. And now I'm ready to start stitching. So if you look really closely at this pattern, you can see there are grid marks and little dots in the middle of some of the grids. So everywhere there is a dot is where I'm going to make a little cross stitch, like you can see here. And the grids are just there to make sure that my stitches stay even. So to cross stitch, you're basically doing one stitch over another, and there are 2 different ways that you can go about doing it, and they're both fine, even though there's a lot of controversy about the right way or the wrong way to do this. So I'm gonna start up here, and I'm going to go up through the top left corner of where that first dot is, and then down through the bottom right corner. Now in the first method, you just go ahead and cross it as you go. Up, and then down. And I'll do that for the rest of this top row here. There's a lot of controversy about the right or wrong way to do this, but you know what? I'm more of an embroidery artist than a cross stitch artist, so I don't have a strong opinion on whether you should do it this way or the next way. I would suggest, if you've never stitched before especially, give both ways a try, see which one you like best, and go for it. Now we want to make our stitches tight so that nothing falls out and so that it can survive our little mini washing we're going to do in a moment here. All right, so that's one row where I've done it that first way. Now let me show you a different way that you can go about filling out this pattern. So another way you can do it is by making that first diagonal stitch all the way down this row. So instead of crossing it as I go, I'm just doing half of the stitch. so I've finished that part of the row, and now I'm gonna come back up and cross all those stitches. So I kind of, when I've made samples of this hoop, I've done it both ways, and I kind of switch in and out of which method I like to use the best. But again, I'm not an expert cross stitcher. So I thought it would be nice to show you both, both ways, just in case you're brand new. Oops. Now see, my floss came undone. And I'm not gonna get angry, I'm just gonna rethread it. All right, so using some combination of those two methods, I'm gonna go ahead and finish the rest of my heart, and I'll meet you back here at the bottom of my heart. Okay. I cracked myself up. Okay, we made it all the way to the end. Just one more stitch. And now I'm gonna show you how to end your floss once you're done. So to do that, flip your hoop over, and you'll see the back of my hoop is very messy. Nobody's ever gonna look at the back. Nobody cares what the back looks like. You can do two things here. One thing you can do is weave your floss using your needle in and out of the stitches in the back here until it feels pretty tight and secure. And that would probably be enough and sufficient for this project, but if you're feeling like it's a little too loose, you can also tie a knot. So again, without piercing the fabric and just weaving it through those back stitches, I'm going to tie a knot, and then to secure the knot, I'll do it one more time. And then I'm gonna snip this off. So how do we get that paper off? Now, sometimes, I'm gonna be honest with you, I put this whole hoop in the water. But hoop quality has gone down, and with that has increased the possibility that this will rust and mess up your whole hoop. So I'm gonna go ahead and officially recommend that you unscrew this. Mine might be very tight, but I know I can do it. There we go. And take the fabric out. And usually what I'll do is put this in a bowl of water and let it soak for a while. And check it out, just like a cooking show. I've got one here already soaking. This has been soaking for a few minutes now since I've been stitching that other hoop. And you can see that the fabric has already started to sort of melt away. So the next thing I would be doing is taking this over to my sink, which I'm not going to show you because our sink is kind of full of dishes right now, and spraying the rest of this off. If it's still not coming off, or if you're seeing any bleeding, like sometimes the ink from the paper will bleed to your fabric, or in very rare cases, and I say that just because this very rarely happens to me, you may have your floss bleed over a little bit, the color of the floss and the fabric. You can put just a dab of soap on here and hand wash it, and then rinse it out really well until it's all gone. And wouldn't you know it, just like a cooking show, I have one right here that's already been done. So this one I did have to wash to get all the black ink and everything off and all the paper, and it's nice and dry. So then I'm going to take my hoop and just re-hoop the fabric, trying to get it as centered as possible. So you can kind of press down on your fabric like this and see if the heart is nice and centered for you. And I'm going to put my hoop back over. And sometimes you might have to do that a couple of times. See how that's not centered at all. Just to get it right. Well, I'm really not doing a good job centering it while I'm on camera, am I? Then I might go ahead and do this and tighten up my fabric more. And if you want it to be more perfect, you can keep fiddling with it. Tighten it up. Then to finish this off, we're gonna take that circular piece of cardboard that we did earlier, flip our hoop over. I'm just gonna take my hands and gather this fabric, take my cardboard and move it right over. Like that. I'm gonna press it down just so that it's tucked in there. I don't wanna press it all the way down because then it's gonna mess up the front of the hoop. See, I pressed it down just a little bit too much there. But now it'll lay nice and flat on your wall. The light won't come through so you can't see those back stitches. And you're done. And you have yourself a little heart thing. And that's how you do it. Let me know if you have any questions, and happy stitching. Here are some examples of the hearts that I've made. If you don't have supplies, I'll leave a link in the description for a kit, and I'll also leave a link for a free pattern for the heart if you don't need supplies and you just need the little pattern. And I'll leave a link for the paper that I used. So if you have supplies except for that, you'll be able to get that online as well.